Everybody, thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Come Play. So this is the third time that I'm recording this video because for some reason I continue to be scatterbrained and I'm just rambling and I'm not getting my thoughts out properly, so hopefully this time will be the money. But Come Play is the newest horror film to release this weekend for Halloween, and yeah, you know, after last week's The Empty Man, which I wasn't crazy about, I was really hoping that this movie would be a lot better, and after having seen it, I had a good time with it. I found it to be a pretty solid horror film that I found to be pretty engaging and entertaining. It's nothing absolutely groundbreaking on a narrative or character level, but I did enjoy the story, and there's things that are set up and paid off very well at the end of the film, and surprisingly, for a very shitty situation that these characters are in, it has a pretty happy ending that, you know, you wouldn't really expect. So this film is directed by Jacob Chase, who actually directed a short film in 2017 called Larry, which is the name of the creature, the monster in this film. So we got to expand upon that and make a full-length film, which reminded me a little bit of the movie Lights Out from a few years back, which was also based on like kind of like a short film kind of idea, very creepy video premise that I would see on Facebook and YouTube, and they ended up making that premise into a full-length film. So yeah, you have this movie that was based on a short film. The director got to expand on it, so I thought that's pretty cool. And what I'll say is I enjoyed the direction of this film. I felt like the film was well shot. It was visually pretty cool. There was a lot about the ideas of this movie and the characters that I found conceptually pretty cool. If I'm not mistaken, he actually wrote the film as well, and I gotta say, I think he did a pretty solid job with this movie. Like I said, it's not groundbreaking on a horror level. There's nothing about this movie that you haven't seen ever before in horror, but I did find it to be a pretty good time. I was engaged, I was entertained throughout. It's well acted, it's got some great special effects, and it's got some creepy, eerie moments that I think are definitely going to stick with me. After seeing The Empty Man last week and that movie just not doing it for me, I needed a new horror film to, you know, kind of tantalize my soul a little bit, and I think this movie did just that. So let's talk a little bit about this movie. This movie specifically focuses on a young boy named Oliver who is autistic and doesn't really have the ability to speak just yet. He's using various apps on his phone where he can form sentences and people can understand what it is that he's trying to say, and we learn a little bit about his past, and he's had some disconnect with some friends. He's been bullied, he's lonely, he's sad, and he doesn't really know how to get out of his shell. He's going to therapy. He doesn't really have the greatest relationship with his mom. His mom is super loving, but she, you know, kind of feels like there's a disconnect between them. The dad isn't all there. The mom and the dad are going through this divorce, and the kid is just kind of stuck in the middle of all this, doesn't really understand what's going on, and you can tell that he's just struggling with all of this. Oliver in this film is played by a young actor named Azhy Robertson, I believe is how his first name is pronounced, and yeah, you know, I really did enjoy his performance in this film, just based on my own personal experience of family members who are autistic, or friends, or people that I've just met who are autistic. I feel like the kid did a pretty good job in this movie, though I am really curious to hear from those of you who have more experience with people who are autistic, or maybe you're autistic yourself. I'm curious what this film kind of felt like for you as far as the portrayal of autism in this kind of situation. I'm definitely curious to hear that kind of feedback. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the film for what it was. Like I mentioned, it's not groundbreaking on a narrative level. There are elements and characters that are slightly underdeveloped, but I feel like they did a good job of developing our main character, Oliver. And since the actor who plays him does it pretty well, it keeps you, you know, engaged in the story. Sometimes when you have a story that focuses on a kid, if the kid actor isn't great, you know, it ends up just kind of being eh. And in this case, I think he did a pretty solid job. It was believable, and I was engaged in everything that was happening, specifically with the relationship between him and his mom. The mom in this film is played by Gillian Jacobs, and she's one of those actors similar to the father, who's played by Gallagher Jr. There are two actors for me that, like, I recognize their faces, but I couldn't really name movies that they've been in off the top of my head. But I enjoyed their performances in this film. Everybody gave a pretty solid performance on a visual level, on a cinematography level, on the acting level. I found this movie to be pretty entertaining. Now let's talk about the reason that everybody's going to go see this movie, and that is the character of Larry, the monster, the creature of this movie. A character that I found visually just really cool when I saw the trailers. There's something about him that's very eerie and creepy. He's long, he's lanky, he's thin, he's bony, you can see his spine, he's all slimy and sweaty looking, and he has a really interesting premise and idea and concept around the way that he works. Like I mentioned, we learned in the film that Oliver has these loneliness issues. He's separated from friends, he doesn't really have a lot of friends, and he's not handling all of this the best, and he's dealing with, you know, his autism on top of all that, and he's going through a bit of a hard time. While this is all happening, it just turns out that he has a friend that he does not know about. The character of Larry, this monster who's actually been checking him out through the inside of his tablets, whether it's the smartphones or an iPad or various things like that. Since he's primarily using that to communicate with people, this creature has been watching him through these devices and essentially has been creating a bond with this character, with Oliver, and wants to kind of be his friend and wants to take him to his world. Not too long into the film, Larry ends up revealing himself to Oliver via a storybook that appears called The Misunderstood Monster. And in this storybook, it tells the story of Larry and how he's lonely and how he wants friends. And the further you get into the story, the creepier it gets. It kind of reminded me of the Babadook in that way. And yeah, this character essentially wants you to read the entirety of his story in order for him to come into the real world. And this is where the idea, the concept around, or just the rules around Larry got a little bit confusing for me at times, because technically he was present. He was capable of walking around in the real world and affecting the real world, doing things with the real world, but you can only see him if you held up a phone or a camera or something where you can actually see him through the phone itself. So he was technically trapped within technology, and in order for him to come into the real world, you needed to finish the story that he had appear on whatever tablet or device you were using. And if you didn't, he would still be around, and the more you read the book, the more present he would become. But yeah, that was kind of a weird thing, is like you would see him if you had a phone or like a tablet or something to kind of look at him through, but if you didn't use one of those, he was in the room, you could hear him, you knew he was present in a way, and he was able to, you know, harm you or harm others, move things, destroy things. And yeah, that was kind of a strange element, because even though he could do all those things, he technically couldn't get our main character Oliver just yet, because he wants to, you know, make him his friend. That's kind of the basic idea. It's like he's a lonely creature and he wants to take this other lonely young boy and take him to his world. But yeah, that's essentially the basic premise, is that you have this creature inside of these devices who kind of works on electricity. Once you watch the movie, you'll understand the lore a little bit more. But yeah, he works on electricity. He's able to travel via electronic devices, and he's able to be in the real world, affect the real world, but he can't do anything as far as taking Oliver to his world just yet until they end up reading the whole story. And one thing I really enjoyed about this film is it kind of flipped a very common trope on its head. You know, we've seen it with Child's Play, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and so many others, where you have this creature, this villain of the story that's kind of hard to explain to people without looking like you're crazy. And in this case, when you have a young boy who literally can't speak and has autism, and people already kind of struggle with him, you know, it would have been the easiest way to just kind of write the story around where he sees the monster, he knows what's going on, and nobody believes him until the end of the movie when shit gets real. But in this case, Larry the monster ends up showing himself to people very early on in the film, which is something I really enjoyed, because it kept the pacing of the film moving. And this movie never really felt like it was slow, it never felt boring, and anytime anybody doubted that Larry existed, it wasn't too much longer into the film that Larry showed himself to these people. So constantly you had different characters being able to see Larry and seeing what's going on and being able to kind of learn how they're going to have to manage and deal with Larry. Like I mentioned, narratively, this isn't a groundbreaking film, but I found it to be a good time. I think this is the kind of movie that will thrive on Netflix and Hulu, and even the kind of movie that if you see like in the $5 bin one day on Blu-ray, definitely check it out. It's a movie that I think is worth checking out. It's not absolutely amazing, but I thought it was well acted. It had some creepy visuals. The monster and the concept behind Larry I thought was pretty cool. As I was watching it, I wasn't scared, but I did think to myself that I could see this movie freaking out quite a few people. There are a few jump scares in the film that are a little bit cheap, but there were a few that actually got me. Not necessarily didn't really get me jumping, but definitely had me internally like, ugh, that's a little bit creepy. So yeah, I enjoyed the film. It wasn't anything crazy, but I am curious to hear what you guys But yeah, I enjoyed the film. It wasn't anything crazy, but I had a good time with it. Well acted, well shot, a cool concept with a pretty surprisingly nice ending with a very shitty situation. So I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. So have you seen this movie? Have you not seen this movie? Are you planning on seeing this movie? I definitely want to hear what you guys have to say. Hit that like button down below if you guys enjoyed this video. Comment your thoughts down below. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.